All right. So, Fanatic, I'll let you, you're the one who wanted to talk about this, so I'll give you the floor to kind of bring up your thoughts and what you wanted to confront me about.
Okay, so look, it really boils down to hmm. I guess the great replacement, I guess, is a good launching point, but I think the broader conversation that I'm interested in is it seems like at one point you've had the nickname, people used to call you alt-right Barbie, right? And it was basically like the idea that you were like this,
It's
you
because they
know,
think I'm so cute.
sure, you're a hyper blonde, bleach blonde chick talking about all these like alt right talking points and stuff, like pretty conservative, like really hanging around a bunch of identitarian movements and like putting out like videos and stuff like talking about the great replacement. So then there was a bunch of alt-right stuff, and then there was a whole boat incident and all sorts of nonsense, right? And then after all of those things, you kind of disappeared, and then you came back, and it seemed like some people had gathered from a video that you released that you were more so somewhat central, or at least you had maybe stepped away from some of the more extreme alt-right positions. But it didn't seem like there was ever any like disavowal communicated. It just seemed like it was just a, hey, that's a thing of the past, I'm no longer that person now, and just kind of moving on. Meanwhile, you have the left-wing media that's trying to like make some associations between you and the Christchurch guy, right? And I think
Sure.
you made a video kind of distancing yourself from him. And I guess where I say personally, where I feel is I think that this movement, the great replacement idea, it seems like it's still influencing people today. So when you have that guy from Buffalo, go to Buffalo, New York, and shoot up those black folks in that supermarket, and he's like, in his manifesto, he's talking about the great replacement as the Christchurch guy did, and then you being one of the earlier purveyors of the great replacement theory, then it seems to me like there should be some sort of disavowal, especially when you see how it's being used and interpreted.
I no longer take the accusation that I'm the purveyor of the Great Replacement theory seriously whatsoever, nor take any moral blame for it, because I think it's far more likely that any of these people, first of all, there's never been any association with any of these shooters and me. There's never been any proof that they watched my content, watched my videos, subscribed to my channel, donated to me. None of that. In fact, in thousands of word reports that police have done on these shooters, I've never been mentioned once. Y'all know when that manifesto hits, I'm there clicking what is it, F10 to search search for my name. But no, that's never been the case. What has been the case, though, is there have been mass mainstream media reports on the Great Replacement saying not only that it's true, but that they support it. New York Times, Guardian, Time Magazine, all of these places have reported that white people are being replaced, they're being destroyed. Some of them, I know you had a recent clip go viral on Twitter from, she's a brown reporter from Nova Media, but she basically was talking about how the Great Replacement theory is anti-Semitic, it's bigoted, it's Islamophobic. And then in the same clip, someone splices in another one of her videos where she says, "We are replacing the white British population. We're winning, boys. This is great. We're doing this." So like, you have the mainstream media constantly in the same breath telling people they can't talk about this issue while also saying it's completely true and a good thing. So the idea that all of this came from me, just spurred from me on the internet, as if every mainstream media article
I
aren't
didn't
saying
say
the
that
exact
though,
same thing, and the more likely
but I didn't say that.
culprits of people discovering or thinking about this theory. I'm sure, but some people have said that, right?
For sure.
I
So
think
here's the
it's a
deal,
very
though.
silly perspective.
I don't want to have a conversation with the random people on Twitter who say completely insane things or insanely leftist media that are making quite crazy statements. I only want to be responsible and accountable for the things that I say. And what I introduce into the conversation is that you are one of the earlier purveyors, right?
So
Not
what's
that you.
wrong with talking about something that, as Brittany kind of acknowledged,
Hold
is
on.
just true and happening?
Well, hold on. Just there's a bunch of things that you said. You said that there was no evidence that any of those people had watched any of your content. And while we can't find any specific evidence that these people watched your content, I think it's incredibly likely that they watched your content. One, by obviously the associations of the people that you were associated with that they donated money to. For instance, one of those people was Stephen Molyneux. You were going and doing a tour in Australia and like a short leg tour and like talking about like a bunch of political things. He donated to the identitarian movements that you were doing documentaries with. Maybe not a documentary, but you were filming videos and things with. He donated directly to Rebel Media, who was your employer at a point in time. His shooting didn't happen until
He didn't directly donate to Rebel Media, but
okay,
that,
right.
that's false.
What you're saying is that he donated, I believe your response to that was that he donated specifically towards some defense campaign, some sort of legal.
Yeah, that was
legal
just
fund.
being run through the processing system that Rebel had.
But the vast majority of Rebel Media's defense funds are about their own lawsuits that they're involved with, as they're constantly suing and being sued by other people.
It wasn't for a rebel cause, but
okay.
So
well, I
that's
don't
a
know.
moot point.
I don't know if we have that, but sure. So he donated to Rebel Media. You were part of
he
Rebel
didn't. He
Media.
did not donate. He did not donate to Rebel Media.
I'm sorry. He donated to something that
fundraiser.
Rebel Media was Rebel Media fundraiser.
So it wasn't to me, and it wasn't to my employer. They
I'm
were
not-
simply running the processing system.
Okay,
but-
so he donated through something that Rebel Media was specifically fundraising, right? And so he donated to Rebel, who was employed by you, and again to a bunch of individuals who you had worked extremely closely with. One of which was Stephen Molyneux, the other one which was I can't remember his name.
But yeah.
Stefan, however you, yeah, Stefan Molyneux. The other one I could try to find his name. It was it was the guy that was part of the identity.
And what does any of this have to do with
I would say that,
why I should apologize? I don't
I didn't
think
say
that
you should
Obama should
apologize
apologize
yet.
for
That wasn't
Weather
my
Underground,
position.
bomber
But you're
donating to his
strawmanning.
campaign.
You're strawmanning because I didn't say that you should apologize necessarily. What I
But
did.
this whole you started this with I would believe there needs to be some sort of apology or something for
No, I said the word
associations. You
disavowal.
started by
I
talking
said
about
disavowal.
disavowal. So why
Sure.
would a donation to someone, even if it were to me, why would that require a disavowal? I don't choose who donates to me, nor do I choose who donates to other people that I've spoken to.
I would say when there are people who are running reports that are specifically referring to the Great Replacement as having potential to galvanize individuals into becoming specific civic nationalists that they say could result in extreme behavior, and we're seeing it play out time and time again from different mass shooters in different locations, and this is something that you advocated for. You advocated for a solution to the Great Replacement to be for people to become civic nationalists. That was one of the things that you suggested. And
What's wrong with civic nationalism?
Well, what you're seeing with people who are becoming civic nationalists, specifically around whiteness, is that you're starting to see these people become...
I think you're thinking about white supremacy, not civic nationalism, when you're talking about these shooters.
Well, no,
in fact, they'd probably call civic
I'm
nationalists
sorry,
cucks.
I'm not talking about white supremacists. I'm specifically talking about civic
So
nationalism.
you think that Brendan Tarrant was a civic nationalist?
I'm saying that the civic nationalists have on more than one occasion done acts of violence. Specifically,
what shooting has been done? So the Christchurch shooter was a civic nationalist.
Yes.
What is a civic nationalist?
A civic nationalist is a person who kind of, I guess, establishes... God, I'm coming up with a definition off the top of my head. I understand the concept. But the basic idea is a person who kind of establishes an identity around, I guess, their own race or their own tradition or their own specific country. It obviously is a term that can be used rather loosely, but it basically it involves specifically establishing an identity and an in-group around, some sort of civic.
Do you know why the word civic nationalist came about in right-wing circles?
No.
It came about in right-wing circles as a direct opposition to ethno-nationalism, which is what you just incorrectly defined civic nationalism as having a tie to your racial identity. So ethno-nationalism is where it's like, I identify with white people and that is my nation. Civic nationalism is based on your values of the nation, based on the laws of the nation, the language, which I'd like to think even most leftists support to a degree.
Yeah, but
if
then
they
the problem
don't, then
is...
they don't really believe in a state or a nation at all.
Sure,
So,
but then the problem is that you guys use these words interchangeably. For example, you will talk about immigration. Yes, they do, because there's plenty of times where they will be talking about specific nationalism, and they will specifically be talking about white culture. So when you say that they value their traditions and the history of the country and so on and so forth.
So do you think any sort of nationalism?
A lot of times that those things are centered around whiteness. When you specifically talk about migrants in different places, you're not just talking about if there's Polish or other European migrants, you don't have a problem with it. You have a problem when these people are black or when these people are of a different or when these people are Muslim or when these people are of a different religion in general. So a lot of these things are used interchangeably. Very often.
You don't get to, so many, I don't know if you do this, but so many leftists will say there's no such thing as white culture and then simultaneously accuse right-wingers who say, I want to retain the culture of my country of wanting to retain white culture. Like, you guys need to decide, is American conservative culture that is pro-family, pro-business, pro-capitalism, pro-freedom, is that whiteness? Or is there no white culture?
when you ask me what is white culture, I don't know exactly what that would mean. I mean, that can mean, it depends on how other people want to use it. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as white culture. I mean, it's going to be up to different people to interpret it in different ways, right?
But you just accused me of promoting white culture, so I'd like you to define it.
I'm saying you and your civic identitarians is what civic nationalist
civic
identitarians. Civic nationalist identitarians.
Identitarians aren't civic nationalists, but okay, continue.
Okay, what's the difference? Can you explain to me that? And because maybe I'm using these phrases wrong. Can you tell me what the difference between a civic nationalist and an identitarian?
See, like they're all a bit. Identitarians view. So you're more likely to find civic nationalists in places like Australia, Canada, and America, where the relation of an individual to the land and the country is not so inherent to their ethnic background, right? You will meet ethno-nationalists who believe that despite the fact that their, ethnic background isn't from America, maybe they're German, but they live in America, but they're still an ethno-nationalist, right? That's going to be different from an identitarian who view the culture and ethnic and traditional and historical background of their nation as all being linked. So an identitarian would say France is linked to the French people.
Wait, can a civic nationalist not have those same views? Would there not be overlap where a civic nationalist would also have a value to the things that you just mentioned as far as identitarian?
No, because civic nationalists reject ethno-nationalism. They believe that the inherent part that makes a country is like the laws, the culture, whether it's a Christian culture or a country that has a Second Amendment or something, or free speech laws. That's going to be the stuff that they think makes their nation, or it's in English.
Right, but that's what you just said about
an overlap between being a certain ethnicity and having a Second Amendment.
No, I think
maybe.
No.
I don't know. Your words.
No. What I'm saying is that there's an overlap between the ways that you described these things. So when I asked you the difference between these two, you went in and said this is where you'll find civic nationalists, and then said this is what you will find. This is
there's an overlap in lots.
Hold on.
Of
what you said was
world,
then you said this is what substantially is an identitarian, and what you described as would be substantially found within identitarianism were literally some of the exact same things that you would find within civic nationalism.
Correct.
So then there is a great deal of overlap
between men and women.
So you're making this crazy appeal about some sort of distinction.
Water.
Okay, good. So then it seems
men
like
have a brain and women have a brain, but there's still significant differences.
I totally agree. And the question that I specifically asked you is, can you tell me what the distinction is between these two things? And what you mentioned were things that were significantly overlapping. So again, can you please give me the distinction? What is distinct about an identitarian that cannot be found within?
The distinction is the focus on ethnic identity and heritage. There's a big and that's one of the main reasons that the word civic nationalist came about in conservative right-wing circles, was to distinguish themselves from people who have a serious tie to their nation, heritage, tradition, but also see ethnicity as extremely important, which
can ethnicity
within
not
some
be
identity
interchanged with
circles,
race? In plenty of occasions?
Race, yeah. Race, ethnicity, whatever. That's something that civic nationalists generally reject. That the culture of a country is entirely inherent on its race. That's what a civic nationalist is. They reject that, whereas someone who is an ethno-nationalist embraces that, and that's a huge distinction.
Okay, so my point being, it seemed like, well, you definitely you link with a bunch of those people, and it seemed like when the Christchurch shooter and this recent dude in Buffalo, I don't remember his name, thank God, when you have these people, and Dylan Roof as well, when you have these people who are literally spouting off the Great Replacement as part of their motivation, and then you have reports that are basically saying that this is something that is found within this movement. We're starting to see people encouraged to do things, and it seemed like you had what do they call it, a crisis narrative attached to the Great Replacement. It's not just something being said as simply as, hey, well, there's just a thing, and it seems like this thing is happening, right? Which is what the left wing might do, where they'll say it seems like that the white people might not be the majority forever in the United States. Sure, whatever. Some of them do, maybe, I don't know. But if someone makes that statement, there's no crisis narrative attached to it. But there's a difference when you start saying Europe is doomed, and if we don't do something about it, it'll be too late. You're going to be killed, and you're using the word killed over and over again, and they're intentionally overthrowing these tyrants. And when you're using that kind of verbiage,
when did I say people are going to be killed?
You said in multiple videos.
Okay, can you just give me a quote so we can see the context?
Oh man, I don't know if I
because that's important. If I'm saying you're going to be killed if you run around naked in an Islamic square, yeah, you probably will be, and it's probably good advice to tell people not to do that, right? Depends on the context of the quote, what I'm saying.
Sure, I'll give it
also,
exactly.
I
got the
always
quote.
think
I have the quote for you.
Okay,
You said,
yeah, let's hear it.
What is happening is being described by French writer Renaud Camus as the Great Replacement, the replacement of native populations with immigrants that have no connection to the history of culture of the country and have no intentions of assimilating to or preserving it, therefore shifting the entire inner identity of European nations, as a result, killing them.
So killing the nation and its identity.
Well,
and
sure,
also that's not even my quote. I'm quoting Camus.
Well, yeah, no. So this is the thing. Yes, you can be quoting Camus, and that seemed like that was more of a paraphrase than a direct quote. And also, what you're doing is you're saying this isn't my quote, but what you're doing is you're trying your best to describe and paraphrase this ideology. You literally labeled your video "The Great Replacement." You quoted him in the beginning, but then are giving your own take on this. To try to distance yourself from this video that you are disseminating seems a little disingenuous to me. Or no?
I'm not distancing myself. I'm clarifying. I'm not telling people you're going to be killed tomorrow. I'm saying that the culture and identity of these nations will be killed eventually, as leftists are cheering on and saying should happen.
So that's one quote, but there were multiple.
If things stay on the course. I want to ask though. This is really an important.
But wait, before we move on, just to establish.
No, I'm not moving on. I'm actually addressing something else you said, because you're gish galloping a bit and including like 5 different points in every
I'm gish galloping?
Argument.
I'm trying my best not to. But okay.
I know. So I just want to touch on the, alarmism you talk about, because a lot of people bring this up. They say, yeah, crisis narrative. You're partaking in stochastic terrorism if you tell people, that the end of a country is coming or some sort of disaster is occurring, which I find is interesting, because I think every political activist, no matter what cause they're for, partakes in quote unquote crisis narratives, because part of the reason we engage in politics is because we think there are crises to be solved, right? So someone who says, black men are being killed in America at an exponential rate and something needs to happen about the way policing is going on, otherwise black people are in danger on the streets. Someone like yourself has probably had these conversations. That's a bit of an alarmist discussion, right?
This seems like an insane whataboutism.
Can we have, yeah. Well, if the whataboutism leads to hypocrisy on your end, then that raises a lot of questions, doesn't it?
Sure, but okay.
If you're allowing a crisis narrative to be discussed in every other context, but not in this one, even if there is a crisis to be discussed. So if someone, for example, says, hey, the world is going to end because of climate change, we need to do something about it, inevitably, sure, you might have some people say, well, I best become an eco-terrorist because what the hell else? The world is about to end, gonna go do that. Does that mean no one can say the world is going to end because of climate change anymore?
No, I would say that there probably needs to be, make sure that there's one reasonable attachment to the things that are being talked about. And I would say that if something is factually accurate and the intention of the individual is to say something that will lead to some sort of positive change, for example, in the narrative that you just gave, the preservation of the earth, then I think maybe you might say that, well, there are some bad people who will do bad things sometimes. But there's a difference between what you are doing, in which some of the information that you were providing was false. When you were talking about
what information was false?
Well, for example, when you were talking about the Great Replacement and talking about the French population and how that so many people were going to be foreign born by a certain amount of time, and that the Muslims were, that's what you were implying, that Muslims were taking over the country and so on and so forth. Muslims were overthrowing the country, I'm sorry, your words. When you're making those kind of statements and then you find out that the immigration, in the numbers that you're cited, are the predominant immigrants are Polish people who are also white, who are not Muslim, and you're finding out that the third most popular immigrant population is also white, and you're starting to see that these people are not, it's not like Muslims are super duper overthrowing the country, then it seems like you're alarming people about something that isn't actually happening and leading towards harm when other people feel, again, because of this crisis, that they need to do something. Okay, let me just make sure I'm saying it succinctly. The problem is, you're telling people that there is a crisis and that they need to do something, and then as they're and one of the things that you're telling them to do is to align themselves with civic nationalists, and then through those movements, who I don't believe are incredibly distinct from identitarian, but given the sheer amount of overlap, they start getting galvanized into doing very heinous things like Buffalo, New York, and Christchurch shooting. Then it seems like there is an attachment here that you're doing everything to distance yourself from, while all of the evidence tends to show that yes, there is a correlation. This guy was looking at all of the people he donated to. The Christchurch shooter donated to all of the people that were in that you were working with.
Are you going to let me respond to one point? Can we stick to one point at a time? Because you keep gish galloping and including, you're like, let me finish, but you're going into different
I'm not
points.
gish galloping, but okay, I felt like it was all
just
pretty
let me, because like if you're going to bring up the topic, like, oh, you're lying about the fact that there's, mass immigration to these countries. That's undisputable. The fact that mass immigration is happening at rates that are unsustainable. This is something
mass
you can
Muslims.
Ask any.
Don't wait. If you're going to interrupt, I mean, if you're going to address it, then make sure you're addressing the thing that I'm saying. And the thing that I specifically said was, you made the assertion that Muslims were the ones that were migrating to the country at alarming rates, such that they were becoming whatever, and then you cited numbers of immigrants, not detailing that the vast majority, that the largest group of immigrants to that country were also non-Muslims. So if you just look at foreign-born individuals and you look at their population, and then you also pair that next to or juxtapose that with, hey, Muslims are overthrowing this country, and then you don't include the fact that the vast majority of immigrants are non-Muslim people, then it's misleading.
When did I say Muslims are overthrowing the country? If you could give a quote. But the point is, rates of Islamic immigration to Europe are drastically up, and this is undisputable. This is something that even the left-wing Swedish prime minister is acknowledging in their own country, saying
yes, but the majority of migrants are other Europeans.
And it's not. No, she's talking about specifically Islamic immigration. The reason you don't hear about the Polish immigrants is because they typically culturally can assimilate more. Yes, there are some issues, but you're not hearing about perhaps the large numbers of Polish immigration because that's not causing problems in these countries with assimilation.
Sure, but here's the thing, where you're doing it even right now. First off, let me give you the quote that you asked for earlier. You said the Great Replacement is a term coined by French writer René Camus, referring to what he views as the irreversible overthrow of France and its culture by Muslim immigrants from the Middle East and North Africa. So that's when you're talking about that. So when your video is about the Great Replacement, and one of the data points that you're using to support your video is specifically just the foreign-born immigrants, but you don't include the information that the vast majority of foreign-born immigrants are from Poland, then or other European origin.
Send me the statistic I used. I'd be happy to look at it and correct it if you are correct that is a statistic that includes Polish immigrants.
I don't happen to have it on me right now, but the person who did
that,
you can
confirm that I used a stat in the video, saying this was Muslim immigrants. I specifically said these are Muslim immigrants, and I claimed that when it was actually Polish. If you can point that out, if you can send me the data, I'll read through it on stream right now. You just have to send it to me.
For one, again, it's not me just claiming. Again, this is direct quote in which you said it was to overthrow France in its culture.
I'm not asking about the quote. I'm asking about the stat you said I lied about, because that's important. If I lied about a stat, I want to know and I want to correct it. But you're going to have to send it over. I'm not going to just take your word for it.
I don't expect you to take my word for it. I asked for you to let me finish my sentence, and then you'll understand exactly what I'm getting at. First, you said it's the overthrow of France and its culture by Muslim immigrants. That was literally how you defined the Great Replacement in your video that is now deleted. Thankfully, somebody sent it to me.
So wait. I said the overthrow, or I quoted Camus in saying the overthrow?
You were quoting Camus, but again, you keep making this distinction where there is none, because when you keep trying to say, I didn't say these things, but you're literally making a video about the Great Replacement and then saying, here is what the Great Replacement is, and you're also making a video prior to that called Europe is Doomed, in which you talked about Islam and specifically birth rates and so on and so forth. I get you. So then again, I'm glad that you do think that. So then I don't know why you keep intentionally trying to distance yourself from the statements as I'm quoting them and trying to make it seem like I'm not saying that. Camus said that, even though you're quoting Camus and saying I'm not going to support these ideas.
I am quoting Camus, and I'm simply establishing a fact. That's not my statement. That's Camus' statement.
But you're sharing it. But are you disseminating? Right. So then why do you keep distancing yourself from it?
Because of mass immigration.
So then this isn't a distinction.
So what's the point?
Okay, so now, first off, you made that statement first, and then secondly, when you gave the statistics specifically about the migrant population and foreign-born population in your own source. Thankfully, again, I didn't have to do this homework myself. I watched Hayat's Vadim's video where he linked to the sources and specifically pointed out that
can you send me the link to that? I'll check it out.
Sure,
I'm not going to take your word for it right now. I'll look at it.
You don't have to.
But
it's
fine. Really, to me, if that source, I'll check. Yeah, go ahead, Brittany.
How does the Great Replacement impact either of you?
I'll say the way the Great Replacement impacts people like myself is when you look at like the Buffalo shooting and where people are going out of their way to target specifically African American communities, armed by this crisis narrative that she was one of the early purveyors of, and they believe that they need to do something drastic, which means killing random black people like in random neighborhoods. That's where it starts to do that. So then that creates trauma within the black community where we start feeling like, hey, it's nerve-wracking because you don't know when these things are going to happen to you, right? So then I think that's where these things happen, where my immigrants abroad start feeling like, man, there's just a sense of doom associated with the idea that you don't know who is going to be armed in this way, and it seems like more and more people are being galvanized towards this movement. That's how it affects people within the United States. Those sorts of things like Buffalo, and there was just recently a shooting in Chicago where barely any media is reporting about it, where another guy goes there, had 5 different guns, one of which was an assault rifle, a bunch of handguns, a shotgun, had insane amounts of ammo, multiple rounds for each gun, shot into a random park in a black neighborhood, and then they found writings of his, which they keep calling incoherent ramblings, which incoherent rambling is just another code for replacement theory stuff, because that's the same thing that they did with the guy who shot up Buffalo, New York. That's how it impacts us.
I could sit here and spend a whole hour making appeals to emotions, describing the families and losses and heartbreak of every single person who died in 9/11. I could describe the little girl under the blanket in Nice who was run over by a truck and talk about this is how Islam affects me. This is why we should outlaw the teachings of Islam. This is why people shouldn't be allowed to talk about it.
I'm not
because
just
look at
making
this dead child at a concert in Manchester, right? I could sit here and do that all day, but that would be horribly bad faith. There is a difference between advocating violence, there's a difference between committing violence, and there's a difference between talking about subjects. And if anything, the Great Replacement has far more, background in actual fact and data than talking about certain religious beliefs in Islam. So the idea that people shouldn't be able to discuss certain topics or are responsible for the actions of violent, crazy people because they've discussed certain topics in a non-violent way is not only insane to me, but it's something that is directly in contrast to the argument that we've been hearing from leftists and progressives for years and years on end. Hashtag not all Muslims. Don't you dare get upset about any Muslim speaker or preacher or anyone who's just socially a Muslim, whatever, their family is Islamic, because they are not responsible for the actions of a few violent, crazy people. And if you're going to hold that standard to Islam, then you better damn well hold it to people having an intellectual discussion about the data happening with immigration in Europe.
But again, the problem isn't just specifically an intellectual discussion in which the data is being skewed. It's also, again, the crisis narrative and tone of the video, which you also later on yourself said that if it was something that you regretted, that you would change your tone and some of the imagery that you used in order so that people would not end up becoming galvanized towards doing violent actions.
I don't think I'm responsible for people committing violence.
I'm sorry, but that's what you said. You make those statements.
Listen, are you going to let me finish my sentence so I can explain to you why I said that?
I'm sorry, I was in the middle of speaking and you interrupted me, and I waited until you were done speaking before I spoke. So if you would let me finish, then I'll go ahead and go on.
Are you going to gish gallop or let me respond to what you just accused me of?
I'm not gish galloping. I'm not. What I'm doing is literally making a simple statement, and you just went on for quite a while. If you would just let me finish, it's not like I've been going on too long. Specifically, when you say that you recognize that some of your tone and some of the imagery and some of the crisis, I mean, you didn't use the word crisis narrative, but just some of the way that you told the narrative, you would say if you would change that because you recognize that how that has been harmful. If you're saying those statements, and I have the quotes for specifically the things that you were saying, then it seems like, yeah, you do have some regrets for it. But now anytime we try to assign that, when you will make the broad statement, hey, I regret this. But then when we say, hey, this is the results of it, you'll say, no, I had nothing to do with that. What's the point of regret if you're going to deny all of the attachment?
I am always looking.
Wait, would you accept that she could take accountability for not wanting to repeat the action, but not actually be responsible for any of the shootings? Like, I think, like, is Lauren, like, somewhat bigger than I think she is? Is she, no offense, Lauren, but, like, are you that important?
Hold on.
Why would
I'm not making it. So no, I'm not definitely saying that she's bigger, and nor am I saying that. She was pretty big at the time, specifically in these alt-right circles, and I'm not saying that she's directly responsible for the shooting. But I am going to say, if she recognizes that the imagery, the way that she's doing it, the crisis narrative in the way that it's going, is galvanizing certain individuals, then absolutely, at some point, you can say there are more loose associations. And then when she goes on record to make false statements, Like, that guy never saw my video. He did so on and so forth. And it's like, well,
He didn't. There's no proof.
Right. So
literally zero.
Yes,
so
Lauren.
If you
And
say that's a
I
false
got
statement,
you, but no, I'll tell you why it's a false statement, because there's a very, I'm sorry, absence of evidence is not the same thing of evidence of absence. Yes, we can say that there's
you
no
want me to prove
first
a
off,
negative?
No, I don't want you to prove a negative, but I don't want you to make statements that are reliant upon the idea that you can prove a negative, and that's what you're doing when you say, I know he didn't watch my videos. That's what you're doing, and
fine.
you can't prove that.
There's absolutely no proof that he watched my videos.
Absolutely, and I will give you that. There is no proof that he watched your video, but I would think that any person, first off, they said that he was specifically, hold on, let me, okay, no, I'm not saying maybe he did. Wait, please don't, don't incorrectly paraphrase what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, first off, the report said that he was absolutely galvanized on YouTube. That's point number one. Point number two,
right,
you said, I got you, of course. Point number two, the name of his video was The Great Replacement. The only other video titled The Great Replacement at that time was yours. Third, he donated to all of the people in the circle specifically that you were absolutely interacting with, including I don't have to go into all of the details. So all of those things, wait, let me finish, because I'm laying out, I got you. I'm laying out a point that you can say that if we see all of these associations, we don't need to see the absolute direct connection between these two. If you were alt-right Barbie at the time and this is alt-right Jesus, right, then I think the idea that this guy seeing your videos, it seems a little bit more well-founded. And for you to make the statements, because you've made these statements, he has never seen my video, it's impossible. That was the statement that you made. It is impossible that he saw my video, which you have absolutely no proof to be able to justify.
Have you read the High Commission on the Christchurch shooting?
Read parts of it. Small parts of it. Small. No.
Okay.
That
maybe
one,
excerpts in a experts in a Guardian.
That's what I was gonna. No, excerpts in a Vadim video. Yes.
There you go.
Of course.
The reason I know you didn't watch it is because it says how he got radicalized and it explains how he came to these conclusions.
Yeah.
So you don't have to sit here and make wild assumptions that maybe it was me, because they tell you exactly how he was radicalized.
That's what I just quoted.
It has nothing to do with
That's
me.
what I was quoting when I was saying what he did. That's what I was quoting. Literally, what it said was it said he was radicalized. No, it said he was radicalized on YouTube.
Evidence. Listen, don't just. I actually read the High Commission.
Okay, but did it say he was radicalized on YouTube?
He was radicalized when he went to France.
Did it say
long before I published my video? And he decided to commit the
Did the
attack
commission specifically say? I'm sorry. Please don't talk around it. Did the commission specifically say he was radicalized on YouTube?
Sure.
Okay, so that was a statement that I made that you were trying to run away from. Secondly,
where did he discover the Great Replacement theory? Because it talks about this.
What it doesn't say specifically where it does. What it says is, and I'll quote it, it was due to his underlying political views, particularly his ethno-nationalist views and his belief in the Great Replacement theory, in which I said you were one of the earlier purveyors of. To quote you said you were one of the earlier purveyors of it. You said, and I will quote it directly, I didn't hear what, okay, got you.
It doesn't really matter if he did anyway.
You said, and
you
said, and I quote, I didn't hear anyone talk about the Great Replacement when I first spoke about it. I found it from an obscure French author. It was certainly not being discussed in right-wing circles, and it wasn't controversial at the time. So at the time when you first brought this video back in 2016, your video, The Great Replacement, was in 2017, but you had prior videos, one of which was called Europe is Doomed. Those videos also mentioned inside of the Great Replacement theory and quoted Renan Camus. In those videos, which preceded that, you did talk about the Great Replacement, and prior to that, they weren't incredibly popular in wider circles.
Fanatiq.
You were one of the earlier purveyors.
Are you gonna let me get in here for a second? How does any of this matter when he decided to commit the attack before I published the video?
But no. I'm sorry. He decided to commit the attack before you published the video titled "The Great Replacement." But yes. You were part of multiple videos before, such as "Europe is Doomed," in which he decided. I mean, which preceded him going to Austria, which preceded him deciding to do that.
No. You've just spent this whole time talking about how it was my Great Replacement video.
No,
that
I have not.
Was linked to. Yes,
I never.
Yes, you did.
I have never.
I will. Don't let me finish here. You have spent this whole time talking about how it's inconceivable that this manifesto title would match your video title and that he didn't watch it and you were one of the early purveyors. You made it popular. He most likely, it's, just inconceivable that he didn't find it somehow through you, but he decided to commit the attack before I published the video. So don't backpedal here and say, it had to do with a bunch of my other videos.
Okay, and I will quote once again, this is not the first time that I mentioned the video Europe is Doomed. I specifically mentioned the fact that you worked with Rebel Media, and when you worked with Rebel Media, you did a video talking about, hold on, let me finish. No, don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. No, don't interrupt me. I got you. I'm still talking about the point. I'm still talking about a single point that you're interrupting. So specifically what I said previously, instead of you misquoting and trying to lie, that I tried to make this entire statement specifically about your video titled The Great Replacement. What I did say previously,
do you think he was trying to link my Great Replacement video to the shooter?
What I did say previously, and I stand by, is the fact that you did work with Rebel Media, which is where I said he donated to. Secondly, I mentioned. Okay, I got you. We're past that. We're past that.
Yeah. So why do you bring it up again?
Because specifically Rebel Media is where you released your video, the first video talking about the Great Replacement.
But he didn't donate to Rebel.
Hold on. Well, it doesn't matter. Sorry. No, can you stop interrupting? I'm going to make this point, and I'm going to go ahead and lower my voice, and we're going to get calm, and I'm going to make my point. Instead of you interrupting me a billion times because you're trying to throw me off, I'm going to go ahead and finish this point, and please don't interrupt me. What I said earlier was specifically, I mentioned the connection between Rebel Media. The reason why I mentioned this connection was specifically because you worked with Rebel Media, and while you were working with Rebel Media, you ended up doing a video back in 2016 before he decided to do the shooting, in which you were talking about the Great Replacement. Thank you, Hey, it's Vadim. So you had already made videos, and another video, a second video called Europe is Doomed. So you had a total of 3 videos, all of which talked about the Great Replacement. The only video that happened, that you could maybe argue that happened after he had already decided to do his attack, was your video titled The Great Replacement. I have never on this podcast or any other stated that his entire galvanization was specifically from your video called The Great Replacement. What I have stated was that you were one of the earlier purveyors, and that time, the first time when you did that was in 2016. That's what I stated.
Okay, all of that's irrelevant, but Brittany, did it sound like he was trying to link my Great Replacement video to the attack?
Okay, so there's like this, you were making this assertion that Lauren, no offense, is like this great, like, magical, powerful woman who's like inspiring shooters when she's probably just like a really basic white woman conservative who I saw her 3-hour documentary today, or manifesto, and I just relate to her growing up conservative, but I'm from an immigrant background. My parents are from Iraq, in case you don't know that.
What does this have to do with the conversation?
Wait, listen. So you're like, in your head, you've like villainized Lauren, which is fair because she used to work in a really stupid bubble with stupid people, which she talked about in this recent video. So she admits that she's grown, but you're not letting her grow. So the question is like, what will she have to do? Because she's not, there is a migration happening because that's what humans will do. And you can talk about why it's happening, but it's just happening because humans are going to do it. So Lauren, you're making her sound way more important than she is, and I don't know why you think Lauren Southern is that big of a deal.
Lauren, I think it's a really great idea for you to include this person in this conversation. She's running great cover, and I love her for it. Here, I'll answer your questions. What could she do to grow? I'll answer the question. What could she do to grow?
Okay. I don't want your advice on how to grow. I don't care about it.
No. I'm just responding.
I don't think you have my best interest in mind, nor do I think you care.
I'm responding specifically to what Brittany asked me. You invited her. You invited her into the conversation and had her interject. So please allow me to respond to her useless and seemingly innocuous or whatever unfounded interjection. Specifically, what I would say is the thing that is indicative of growth is when you actually do things to indicate that growth. So for instance, maybe there was a point in time when I had really hyper conservative views that others might see were somewhat harmful, specifically about different demographics. I don't have to get into any of those specifics. When I've grown,
I'm going to assume the gays.
Nope, I don't have to say anything about any of those individuals. Now, what I can say is, as I've continued to grow in those areas, you'll see a complete difference. You'll see me walk back those statements pretty clearly, where I will say, I don't believe that anymore. That was a position that I had, but not anymore. But the thing is, she hasn't. As she said over and over again, she's reaffirmed multiple times, I haven't changed at all. I have not changed any of those beliefs. I still believe those things wholeheartedly. So once you make those kinds of statements, where is the growth that you're indicating? If the growth is supposed to be some change in mentality, yet she's saying that nothing has changed, she's saying, I will go on record and say, I haven't changed at all. I'm not weaseling. I still believe the exact same way. I'm still the same person. Then I don't know why you're asserting that there's some growth there. And secondly, hold on, because she made multiple statements. The other thing, I'm not making the statement that like, oh, she's some grand so-and-so bigger than what she is. What I said was she was the early purveyor, which she stated, as I quoted from her herself. No one else was talking about this in right-wing circles. At the time, it was something obscure. I happened to be the whatever. And the very first video that I'm aware of specifically in that regard was hers. So no, it's not me.
You're making her sound like a thought leader. Like, how old are you, Lauren?
I'm 27 right now, but sorry, I just really need to jump in here. When you say early purveyor, that's fine, but it has nothing to do with the statements you're attaching it to, which is responsibility for violence and attacks. That has not, you can be an early purveyor of anything and have no responsibility for any attacks of crazy people. You can be an early purveyor in America of Islamic thought and have absolutely nothing to do with 9/11, right? So that's a moot point. Now, as for the growth thing, I think the reason you're so confused is because you have a very narrow view of what growth is, which I see often with progressives. They believe growth means changing your opinions and agreeing with me. If someone grows, it's because you're more like me. That's not how growth works. I can have the same opinions and still believe I can approach them in more intellectual and more thoughtful ways that ensure people understand what I'm trying to get across and don't misunderstand me, right? There are better ways to communicate, and I've grown in that aspect. That's why I do documentaries more often. That's why I have more care with doing longer videos, because I think there's a lot of room for miscommunication in 5-minute, clickbait titles. Of course there is. You're leaving out tons of necessary information for a wider, massive conversation, and immigration is one of those really hot topics that requires a lot of discussion, a lot of investigation, right?
So how have you grown then? You tell me.
This view of growth as just being, you become a
that isn't
progressive
my
left winger.
Nope.
It seems
so
like,
well, you're like
no.
Really
Okay, so I love it. I love it. Running cover again. I didn't say that you have to end up.
Okay,
No. I never made that statement.
Her running cover.
Of
her
course,
agreeing with me when she's
do.
left wing and we disagree on a lot of things.
Of course I do, and literally any person listening to the conversation can
Disagreeing
see
with
it.
you is
What
not
I said.
running cover.
Well, if she's making, I got you. Okay, you can say that once again, a straw man. If you're telling me that specifically, I'm saying that growth is only becoming more left wing. I've never said anything close to that. I would implore you to quote something where I said something that I'm saying. What I'm saying. No. You don't get to keep misquoting me, and then every time I correct the record, try to interrupt me. Again, what I said is growth is indicative of some sort of change. If you mention,
but you think it's change in opinion.
Period. In order to be able to, in order to say, please stop interrupting. In order to say that someone grows, there has to be a change. And when Lauren makes the statement repeatedly, I have not changed at all. I still am the exact same. Then I need you to explain to me how you've grown. Can you do that, please?
Wait, in her last video, her 3-hour manifesto, she literally documents how she's changed.
Can you tell me how you've grown with regards to the Great Replacement?
Like how Lauren has grown?
No, I'm asking Lauren, can you tell me, or you tell me, what ways have you grown?
What ways have I grown? You can watch my 3-hour manifesto like Brittany just
So it seems so disingenuous to sit there and say, well, the only way you'll be able to find out is if I do it. So can you just go ahead and tell me right now in the middle of this conversation?
I just don't know why you
are you going to make an appeal? Are you going to make an appeal towards me having to watch a 3-hour video when we're in a conversation right now?
I can tell you right
how
now.
bad faith is. That's what I just asked you. Good, then thank you. Please
Fanatiq,
do so.
can we chill? Can we just take a breath?
I got you, but you recognize she's running hard cover. But I got you.
No, bro, I just don't know why you care what Lauren thinks. I don't care what Lauren thinks.
Why are you involved in this conversation?
I don't know.
Right, that's my question as well. Because obviously I have my opinion.
Weren't you invited? Was he invited after me or before me?
He was invited after you.
Sure, but I had no idea when I accepted originally that you were going to be there. And so far, it seems like we're having a back and forth conversation about something which you were almost entirely uninformed, and it doesn't seem like you're able to meaningfully contribute at all.
I'm a philosophy person, so I just look at it you guys are doing the political angles, which doesn't allow Lauren to grow in any real way.
I don't know how you can assume that. You don't even know what my definition of growth is. And again, I'm asking her for what example she has of growth. And again, nothing that you're saying about being a philosophy major has anything to do with distancing or has anything to do with your actual contributions to this conversation. You haven't done anything.
I don't work in I go human to human. You are a man, she's a woman. You're a real person, and she's a real person. So why are you talking to us like we're not people? I don't know what's going on here.
I don't even know what that means. Obviously, I think you're people, which is why I'm asking her questions about her growth. What does that mean? What are you saying?
Well,
how am I talking to her? I'm sorry, Lauren. Can you please give me a single piece of evidence that I'm talking to you like you're not a person? What is this even talking about? She's detracting from the conversation. I'm listening and responding. You're just saying because I don't agree with you that I'm not listening. But I've been listening and I have been responding.
You've asked me 5 times. For example, at the beginning of this conversation, we were discussing civic and ethno-nationalists, and I gave you the clarifications between them, and you kept repeatedly asking me to redo it.
No, I did not. What I mentioned. No, I'm sorry. That's not what happened. You gave things that overlapped, and I asked you for distinction.
You gotta let me finish here. So then you asked me to describe how I'd grown right after I had just spent a whole rant telling you, I think there are better ways you can approach video making. You need to be more nuanced. You can't just do things in 5-second hits. Yes, you can have opinions on issues, but if you're constantly just talking about them in the form of talking points rather than in-depth discussions, you're probably leaving room for miscommunication, which I think is bad. And I think I have left room for miscommunication in the past when I've based a lot of my videos on these, 4-minute quick hit videos. And that's why I've put more effort into doing investigations, doing documentaries, having conversations with people that disagree with me. I'm talking to more left-wingers now than I ever did at the beginning of my political career because they were the other side. And now I'm like, you know what? I actually want to understand how your mind works. I actually want to hear you as a human being. So it sounds, because you kind of just totally rejected that point that I brought up, it feels like your opinion of growth is an opinion change, not how you engage with topics, not how you speak to other people, which honestly I think is a far more important thing in a human being than their politics at all. I much prefer a person who's a far left progressive that has integrity, that can have a conversation, that can be kind, than someone who's agrees with me on every issue but is a dickhead, right? So there's aspects of growth that are far more important than just your political opinion growth that I'd say I've absolutely engaged in and absolutely grown in that way. But because I guess we're debate brain rot on the internet, the only way a lot of people see growth is if I go back and I say I disavow everything I've ever said. That's not the case. I don't disavow everything I've ever said.
I think it's really, really difficult to have conversations where I'm constantly being associated or strawmanned, and you're putting words in my mouth that I didn't say, misquoting me in different places, literally comparing me to random people on the internet and saying, well, this is what people think growth is, when I haven't said anything close to that because I actually absolutely provided a definition. Secondly, when you were talking about like when I asked you specifically for the distinction between the two, and then you literally just tell me these things that are obviously overlapping, and it takes me debating you into recognizing that there's an overlap in the thing that I was asking you about when I was.
But the overlap doesn't matter. The distinction matters.
Yes, but the overlap does. You're right. The overlap doesn't matter unless a person is asking you for a distinction. So if I'm asking you what's the distinction,
so when I gave you the distinction,
no, you didn't. What you gave me was the overlap. So if I asked you what's the distinction between a square and a rectangle, and you say, well, they both have 4 corners, then it's like, okay, well, again, that's not a distinction. What's the distinction? And then you struggled.
Distinction, man. I mean, you can go back and re-listen to it.
I got you. Maybe it got lost in the debate and interruption, so then maybe I didn't fully grasp that. But I am trying to actually engage in the conversation. But anyway, my point being, again, when you mention the growth thing, right? So yes, if your definition of growth is I used to make crisis narrative alt-right videos and now I'm making crisis narrative alt-right documentaries, it doesn't seem like very much of a growth. It seems like you're probably still contributing to the same problem. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Well, the thing is, one person's crisis narrative is another person's genuine crisis that they're going through, right? I think you only view these things as a crisis narrative because you don't see them as a problem.
No,
whereas
but
if you
objectively,
talk about
they're a crisis narrative.
If you talk about black people being shot by police, and I said you were just talking about a crisis narrative, you'd reject that definition too.
No, what I'm saying is objectively, your videos do implore a crisis narrative, as you have indicated.
So is a crisis narrative always bad if there's a genuine crisis?
As you have indicated.
Because you're saying that with a negative connotation.
So you're going to keep interrupting.
Sort of
as you have indicated when you said that was one of the things that you would change. But now, here you are.
More nuance and depth in the discussion, as I have in a massive documentary called Borderless I made, which you can go watch if you're actually interested. But I don't think you are. I think you're interested in getting your Lauren Southern gotcha.
Lauren, honest to God, if you would much rather have this conversation off stream, I'd have been more than willing to. Legitimately. I don't need to just get you. What it seems like is everybody gets into debate, bro. The previous times that I've interacted with you in panels and things like that, you were the one that said, oh, there's not going to be any content if everyone doesn't debate or if everyone's on the same side. My whole goal is not just to get you. I would much rather have the conversation off stream. And if you would prefer, we can end the conversation right now and then have the remainder of it on another day off stream where there's no get you. I promise you I won't record the conversation. I'm a practicing Christian. I'm not going to lie. That's not my goal here. I do actually want to actually get to the center of ideas. There was a problem in the sense that yes, I do think that the Great Replacement is arming individuals. We're seeing these attacks happen. Christchurch, Buffalo, and now this thing in Chicago. I don't think that's the last of them. And it seems like if you were one of the earlier purveyors, again, I'm not saying you're the only person, but if you were one of the earlier purveyors, as you say you are, of this sort of information and you see the way it's being used, then at least you could probably use to distance yourself from those things and say specifically, while these are the things that we can do, we need to make sure that we're not being violent or whatever the freak you could do to actually intentionally distance yourself from these awful attacks.
Do you think that someone who is a Muslim that practices Islam should be forced to distance themselves from Islamic attacks and apologize for them or change their views on Islam?
I don't think that you need to apologize for them, because you're not, again, as I said from the very beginning, you're not directly responsible. But what I do is, a lot of times I do feel like I have to end up being an ambassador for certain types of beliefs, especially if these beliefs are like closely and non-spuriously attached towards some of these attacks. When you have reports from like when you have
And can you
reports-
answer the question I just asked? Do you think that someone who speaks about Islam is responsible in some ways for Islamic attacks?
No, again, as I was just answering, and I created what I thought was a pretty succinct analogy about me as a Christian and not feeling that I'm responsible for any of the nefarious Christian beliefs. I think obviously then the one-to-one analogy follows that an Islamic person shouldn't be absolutely responsible for some of the more negative aspects that are assigned towards
So you
Islam.
don't think I'm responsible for these attacks?
Not, again, I don't think you're directly responsible for the attacks, because the only person who's going to be directly responsible for the attacks is the individuals who issued them. But what I would say is that you are easily associated with these attacks because of the fact that the people, again, the circles that you were in, the information that you were spreading, disseminating, this was the information that was being used. And I believe that your crisis narrative tone abetted in having these people actually respond in these harmful ways. That's what I would say. When you say Europe is doomed.
But you could say, once again, you could say the exact same thing about any Muslim preacher. You could say every single thing you're saying and just apply it to Islam.
I wouldn't. It depends.
But you wouldn't.
I wouldn't. The reason why I wouldn't is because specifically I would need to see which parts of Islam that they're talking about, because extremists can act in really extreme ways. But I would say that people who are responding in an alarmed fashion such that they're willing to do egregious things probably feel some sort of way panicked. And when you're saying things like, when we're only going to wake up when it's too late, or when you say things like we are doomed, when you say that we hate ourselves and there's nothing we can do about it, when you say that they're killing us.
I've never said there's nothing you can do about it.
I'm sorry, you're right. You said you're saying that the media is blocking us from knowing this information, and they're the people, the powerful elites are doing these things, and so you're making people feel powerless, and you're saying that we have to. And again, all of this speech, it's used concomitantly to build a narrative.
But what if? Let
me just finish. Let me finish this one succinct statement. All of these things, these statements together compile a narrative that there is something alarming happening. No one's doing anything about it. The powers that be won't allow us, and we better do something desperate to fix it. And we're seeing that the desperate acts that these people are doing are terroristic acts. And
those are your words, not mine. We need to do something desperate to fix it. This is why it's very difficult to have a conversation with you, because all the time you're accusing me of misquoting you. You keep doing the same to me.
I didn't say it was a quote. It was a paraphrase.
Okay, well, paraphrasing in a way that's very convenient for what you're trying to argue, right?
Well, I'm doing what I feel is an honest, genuine paraphrase of what I believe that these things amount to. So now, look, here's what's the problem. You're not even willing to entertain my perspective, which, and again, it doesn't seem that spuriously founded, that all of these things concomitantly end up like saying something desperate needs to do. When you say the statements like, hey, we better do this before it's too late, that seems like, yeah, something desperate needs to be done. When you say the powerful...
What did I say we need to do before it's too late?
Join civic nationalist things, and then you kind of leave it open like Jordan Peterson does for the other people to start to end up kind of coming up with their own narratives. That's what it is. You don't ever come up with any peaceful solutions or anything. All you do is just say join civic nationalist movements, and we know how freaking identitarian movements and civic nationalist movements both tend to feel extreme and do extreme things. Those are extremist positions.
So do you think that if you were to say we need to protest the police because of police shootings, that the dozens of people that were killed in the Black Lives Matter riots, everyone who said you should join a movement to protest the police is responsible for that and should have never done that? They should have never done BLM protests. They should have never posted black squares on their Instagram, never supported any of that, because there were some crazy people that took that and committed violence and mass destruction.
One, this is a complete false equivalency, because
it's not at all. Because these are both dire political issues that people deeply care about and want change.
So do you want me to respond or not?
I mean, you're the one who's been talking the most here. So
I got you. Well, look, I'm arguing against one person and another person running cover. But anyways, in response, she has. But in response to the question that you asked, no, I would say that this is a false equivalency. No, I don't believe that simply talking. Of course, obviously. Let me explain. So yeah, I would say that protests have been like part of a civic, part of a the civic discussion for God knows how long. They have obviously, this is how you raise awareness for these things, and no one should say that protest should be problematic. But when you have white Antifa going and hijacking movements and doing violent things in the BLM riots, then yeah, things can get really ridiculous.
Yeah, it was all white people that did all the violence.
I didn't say it was all white people. No, I didn't say that it was all white people. First off, the vast majority of BLM riots were peaceful, over 93%. Second off, when you do discover God knows how many different videos of Antifa people going and doing these riots and black people in those situations begging them, please stop, we're going to take the blame for this, that's a whole nother conversation.
Oh yeah, it was all black people begging white Antifa to stop.
I think in every video that I saw, unless you can show me videos of unless you can show me videos of any white people in those scenarios doing the same begging, then I would like it, but I didn't see any. But again, the vast majority of these things were peaceful, and I think it's insane to sit here and say, hey, we're protesting this thing when we have obviously decades and centuries of examples of hold on.
Civic nationalists and ethno-nationalists when we have BLM people in the States.
When we have examples of decades and centuries of peaceful protests in which people bring awareness about these issues to then try to associate that thing with something, and I think the distinction between that, I got decades and centuries,
riots,
but sure. So you can handpick a few of these riots, but again, the vast majority of protests since the history of protests have been peaceful. So then to automatically assume that these things will be these things to be negative. But again, if I could just finish a single point, so when you try to compare that towards the great replacement theory, when you have these reports in which they're literally saying that this specific identitarian movement and these alt-right people are literally galvanizing people into violence, and we're seeing in egregious death toll attacks, when you see these things, and again, it doesn't seem like there's a whole bunch of peaceful people from these same movements doing the same things, then it seems like there's a greater association. I kind of lost my point because I keep being interrupted incessantly, but it's okay.
You're talking lots, man. I do have to wrap this up pretty quickly here. Brittany, I'm sorry you didn't get to engage much. I apologize. I know I invited you on my stream. Yeah,